welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. We are setting the standard for accountability and responsibility, the ownership of your choices and the consequences for those choices. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for.
Two observations. The first is that I think that there is a huge gap between how the media tries to portray Donald Trump and what he's like when you meet him in person. And that gap is really wide. And so I would say specifically to Democrats and independents, you really do need to sit in the room and feel what it's like. David is right. He is charismatic. He's intellectually sharp and he's funny. And when you put that together, he can engage an audience for a long time and be totally extemporaneous. The other thing I would say that he is very polite and he's kind in a way that was disarming and was not what I expected. And so I felt that I had misjudged him many years in the past. And so I was very glad that I had an opportunity to sit beside him and to actually interact with him one-on-one. It was really, really engaging.
And we are right into it again. So welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the formula, setting this standard of accountability. So what's really kind of interesting to me, so this gentleman that you just saw the clip from, his name is Chamath. I couldn't even begin to pronounce his last name. But he is on a podcast. It's called All In. And it's with David Sachs, who actually was one of the speakers at the Trump rally. There is a really great podcast that they did last Thursday. I'm wrong. They did it last Wednesday. And what was really cool was they talked about, the entire process. David actually spoke there, so they talked to him about that. But one of the themes that I think is so fascinating to me and so interesting, and I wanted to talk about a little bit. I've got some more clips of some things to, just kind of, get a feel for when it comes to information, setting your standard, being accountable, being responsible. And the theme of that topic today is do your research. And what is so important about that? What is so amazing about that? What is so, obligatory about that? Is because if you're just going by sound bites, then what's really happening, I think Rush Limbaugh used to have this thing that he used to call it the drive-by media. And, I always called it, this Molotov emotional cocktail that people want to throw into a crowd and see what it does. In other terms, these days, I think it's probably called gaslighting. But the problem is that people will hear a soundbite, they'll see a headline, they get a clip of something, or somebody manipulates the clip in such a way so that it creates a story that really wasn't there. And again, it creates a story, and you're not really getting the story. The only way reality will come into focus for you is if you're doing the research. As Leonard Bernstein would say, you gotta do your homework. So that's what I want this to be about. I want the awakening of this particular podcast, that thought process, to be about doing your research. And to see some people that when you start thinking about it, and you start managing the cognitive dissonance, the lies that people are telling, it's going to be a little shaky at first. It's going to rattle your cage because you've been lied to for so long that you're like, okay, now what am I supposed to believe? There's a great movement called the walkaway movement, hashtag walkaway. If you search that out, then you'll find out that the gentleman, Brandon Straka, I think the guy actually went to jail because of J6. And again, because of lies that happened. And so what happens is that, people come to this epiphany, is what I've called it, is this moment of, wait a minute, is going on here? I don't know how to take this in. In that moment, all of a sudden, the world is turned upside down. Last week when I did the clip for The Matrix, so it was so great because that Matrix clip talks about the reality of seeing the reality. And in the moment that it's both, and even in that, there's a dichotomy. There's an excitement of, wait a minute, what don't I know? And then the kind of trepidation of, oh my God, what the hell don't I know? So, I mean, you're living in both of these worlds. But I can tell you just from my own experience is that it is one of the most freeing things that I have ever, as a gift to myself, that I have ever given to myself, is to be open to the reality. The only way you can be open to the reality is you have to step away from the emotion. And, that can be a challenge for some people because they find themselves very emotional about life. And you hear it a lot when people are talking that their language is language of emotion and it's not language of logic. Language of logic. Well, I really like that. Write that down.
So watching your interview today, I think it actually gave me an interpretation that I've never had of him before. And us not seeing him more, it actually kind of hurts people on judging him. I guess if that's what the media wants to do, then they're doing a very good job at it.
Yeah, you bet. All right.
Once things are printed, particularly in what are deemed reputable organizations, they become fact or accepted as fact.
Yes.
And this is shocking. I think we've undervalued the role of the media. The media is even more influential than I ever thought. And that means we need to fix it. The solution is to get young people who are sharp and understand the ethical role of journalism. We need to get them into the field because I feel like this is really one of the most poisonous parts of American society because as we know, I don't even have to say it, but the media is where people get their information.
Yeah.
This is obvious. And people don't have time to go to source documents and investigate. They read it. They presume that it's mainly true, if not totally true, and they go with it. And we need young people to go into some of these fields that we never thought were as important. And I think journalism and the media is a big one.
Told for weeks by Democrats who say, oh, in private meetings, I've seen Joe Biden do cartwheels and handstands while doing trigonometry while solving all the nation's problems. We now know that every single person who said that has been lying to the American people.
What's really great about those clips is the understanding that people are being lied to. We've talked about this before. That's where the cognitive dissonance comes in. You're trying to hold two different thought processes and they're in conflict with each other, right? They're disconnected. But the piece I want to kind of pull out of that and extract from it is the fact that the surprise that people are having that they were lied to. Listen, nobody is surprised about being lied to if they're paying attention. Now, it's not a judgment, it's just a reality. For the longest time in my own life, I was lied to by media, by politicians, by all kinds of Hollywood people, by you name it. All these people are lying because they're trying to create a narrative. I don't know what their self-interest is in that. I don't know what their motivation is. All I know is that it was a lie. And when I started to kind of get clear about my own existence that way and where my responsibility and accountability was, it was to investigate. I couldn't just listen to something and say, oh, okay, and then just start parroting whatever that bullet point was, whatever that talking point was. And you see it, right? I mean, they have these videos out there where, they start showing, clip after clip after clip after clip of everybody using the very same words when they're getting out there to try to say something. You watch this. This is a very subtle manipulation that media and Hollywood does, is that they will sit there and they'll come up with some little tiny phrase, and then they just keep trying to use it, and they just keep doing it over and over and over again, and in hopes of brainwashing you, because that's really what that's all about. The brainwashing doesn't happen if you take accountability for your life, if you take responsibility for your choices. So things would come up, and then I would have to do the effort. I'd have to put the effort in. I'd have to put the work in. I'd have to go and start researching things and finding out, where are the lies? What was the lie? You know, I'd heard that Charlottesville thing for the longest time, and I was pretty sure that I had heard it correctly, the way it had actually happened, but I kept seeing the clip, and I just thought, this does not seem right. And so, you know, one night I just started researching it, and I started trying to find somebody that had the entire video where none of it was snipped here and there, and I could actually listen to see and hear what was said. And, you know, if you go back and you listen to last week's podcast, you'll hear that moment that talks about it. Well, Joe Biden, you know, sat there and vehemently said that this is the reason why he decided to run for office, was because of the Charlottesville comment. But it's a lie. So then who's lying? Are you lying? You know, in terms of looking at a politician, are you the one doing the lying, or is somebody lying to you? Even if someone's lying to you and you get in front of a camera and you start spouting that off, well, you're responsible for that. Chris Cuomo says in a debate that he was having just recently with this one gentleman that, you know, and it was all about COVID. He goes, well, that's what we were being told at the time. It doesn't matter, buddy. You are responsible for what comes out of your mouth. You can't be sitting there, trying to push that off onto a staff person. Yeah, maybe they wrote the copy, but you read it. And if you read it, and you read it as though you had some passion behind it, then that is your responsibility. You are accountable. The comedian's name was Dave Smith, I think was his name. And it was very interesting because they did this in front of an audience, and the audience was having none of it. And they started booing and yelling out at Chris Cuomo. But the moment is the reality, is you're not going to get away with this any longer because the internet lives forever, right? And so there has to be an accountability. There has to be a responsibility for you, the individual, to look it up. You can't just take somebody's word for it. You know, there are people in my circle of life that, I have a lot of confidence in who they are and the things that they say. But it's still up to me to go look it up. I can't just say, and just pawn it off. Okay, if I say that, if I just say, well, so-and-so told me that, but I own the fact that I'm the one. That's why sometimes it's just easier to go, well, I think this might be the case. It's when you say that's when you have the power, because you've researched it, you know what the reality is. People say, I believe is nothing. It's an emotional place from which an individual is coming, and they have no responsibility or accountability for it. And they're purposely trying to basically live at a low level of, trying to avoid, the accountability factor. When a person says, I think, it's because they know that there's more information and they need to gather that information. And when you've done your research, when you've done your homework, then you know.
Now, you may be wondering why I'm up here telling you this. I'm no politician, and I don't want to be. But I do care about the truth. And the truth is that the media has lied to us about Donald Trump. I know this because for a long time I believed those lies. So I'm here to set the record straight. The first person I knew who supported Donald Trump was my father. I was shocked. My entire family is racially diverse. And I believed the left-wing propaganda that Donald Trump was a racist. My father said, "No, he's not, Amber. What are you talking about?" And when I insisted, he said, "Prove it." So to prove my father wrong, I did my research and looked into all things Donald Trump. People have to do their research. I watched all the rallies, and I started meeting so many of you, his red hat wearing supporters. I realized Donald Trump and his supporters don't care if you're black, white, gay, or straight. It's all love. And that's when it hit me. These are my people. This is where I belong. So I let go of my fear of judgment, of being misunderstood, of getting attacked by the left, and I put the red hat on too. Thank you. Love you too. I never felt more free and more love for my country than I do now. I want to thank my father, who's in the audience tonight, for opening my eyes. He served over 20 years in the U.S. military. Thank you for your service, Dad. I love you, Dad. I love you. I love you so much. Thank you. When I met the president and Melania for the first time, he was kind and generous and funny as hell. Very funny. The First Lady was gracious and smart with a smile that will brighten up any room.
A lot of people were shocked with your, endorsement of Donald Trump. I mean, you're all about women's rights issues. I mean, what was the reason for the big change?
Is Donald Trump not for women's rights issues?
I mean, I guess a lot of people were asking.
He's trying to make America great again. That's for women too, right?
That's true. I mean,
okay, so there you go.
I know. Does him getting convicted change the way you view him?
Not at all.
I mean, do you think it'll help his chances getting reelected, or it'll hurt him?
I think it helps him more.
I think it helps him more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people see the injustice and what happened, and they want to vote for him more than ever.
I know. I wanted to ask you. So it seems like a lot of celebrities are kind of voting for Trump now. I mean, why do you think people are kind of changing their way of
I think we just did our research, and we're just we're not brainwashed anymore by the left. I can say that about myself. All these years I've been brainwashed, and I'm not anymore.
So even though that clip was really long, I think the point is made really well by Amber Rose, who actually has about 23 million followers. I think between TikTok and Instagram. I think on one of them, she's got 23 million followers. It was very smart of, that party, the RNC, to have her speak, because she's speaking to a conglomerate of people that would not necessarily be paying attention to what's going on politically. But she knows her stuff. And why does she know her stuff? Because she did her homework. And that piece of it cannot be overstated, that the more you look into things, the more you see the reality. Somebody posted, I know Dan Bongino has said this before, is that, when anything happens in particular, the Bongino rule is you wait 24 hours. And somebody else posted that the other day, which I thought was very interesting, is that, the first thing, I think it was Mike Benz, and he says, usually the first story is wrong. And it's wrong because either they don't have enough information or they're lying to you. But the whole thing about people lying to you, there is no lying to you. The individual is saying whatever it is that they want to say, whether it's based in reality or not, whether it's truth or not. It's up to you, the individual, to decide if you want to take that in, you want to have credulity towards that person, and you just want to give them carte blanche that they can say whatever they want and you're going to just accept it. Or you can hear what they have to say, And if it requires action or thought on your side, then it's up to you to research it and to find out what is the reality of this, what is factual. We get back to the language of logic, that we have to start moving ourselves to a place where we are thinking more and knowing more. And we start to move out of all of that magical thinking, which it really isn't thinking at all. It's all magical believing things. You know, that's why when kids are so young, they believe in the Easter Bunny, they believe in Santa Claus, they believe in the Tooth Fairy, because it doesn't require them to be accountable and responsible by having the belief. But as they get older, they come to realize these things are not true. There is no reality to it. And as a result, now they have to move in a different direction. They have to start growing up. When you look back at the idea of somebody lying to you, you have to take ownership of how you contributed to the deception to yourself. Because that's really what it is about, is that you've created a deception to yourself, for whatever reason. Move away from the judgment of that. Just know that it just is or it is not. If you start placing all kinds of value on it, then what happens is you can move yourself to a place then where you will not own it. You will not take responsibility because you won't kind of fess up to it to say, man, I did it again. We don't let people lie to us. We lie to ourselves, right? There is no lying. We're not letting people lie to us. We're letting ourselves lie to ourselves because we're choosing to trust people. I trust what they say. No, I don't trust anything that anybody says. I don't need to. Why? Because I know how to think. I know how to do research. And when you listen to that speech by Amber Rose, it's amazing because she says, I let the media do this. And now she takes responsibility. Now she moves in another direction. Now she knows the reality. And what a freeing place that is. And so then when TMZ approaches her and they want to say, well, how come you're doing this with Donald Trump? And she's like, she easily and happily, is he not about women's issues? Well, there you go. It's like people need to do their research. I was brainwashed. I'm not brainwashed anymore.
Trump just received the biggest political endorsement of his career. Joy Behar and Rachel Maddow discuss how when Trump becomes president, he will take away things like the IRS and The View and the Rachel Maddow show. If that doesn't get you to vote for this man, I don't know what will. Imagine being named Joy your whole life and being a miserable fucking...
And on that note, we're going to end this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me this weekend. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this. Hit that like button if you would. Check out my book at lulu.com. And you know what? Share it with your family and friends. You never know how it's going to help somebody move to the next level for themselves, their own discovery, find their own voice. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for.